All right. Welcome to today's office hours. My name is Mark Stepp. Just want to welcome everybody. I know that some of you are going to be watching from a rebroadcast through replay on our YouTube channel. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today are things that you can step through step by step and go through the process of building workflows in a way that suits you, but use this as kind of an outline. So what we're talking about today is open house workflows. With all the nice weather starting to creep in, thank goodness. We want to, make sure that people have some of the thought processes and the steps that are required for doing open houses and setting up the workflows for open houses. So we're going to do that. For those that don't know me, my name is Mark Stepp. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Realvolve. Really spending the time with everybody to help you understand the why in what we do with automation, technology, in order to create a sustainable business, but one that is not taking you over. So a lot of the automation that I talk about is to help you save time, and that's really what we want to kind of concentrate on. Again, today we're going to talk about the open house process. I'm going to mainly focus on, because there's a couple of different aspects of open houses, kind of the prep work that you need to do in order to get the open house available. And then there's also kind of the post process. And I'll probably hit very briefly on some of the post parts. We may go through a couple of the workflows depending on time available, but then we'll also I'm really going to focus in mainly on the prep work. What is it? What are all the things that you need to be thinking about in order to have a successful open house? So that's an important one. All of our sessions. Oh, hang on a second. I'm going to mute you guys. Hold on 1 second. There we go. So all of these office hour recordings and stuff can be obtained through realvolve.com/office hours. Basically, that just takes you to an area where you can see any of the rebroadcasts. It actually is our YouTube channel, so you can go there as well. So we've got other open house types of trainings in there as well, but we're going to really kind of focus in on this one. So whenever you talk about open houses in general, there are lots of different ways of doing things, lots of different ways that different agents do things. Some agents will have the open house themselves. Some of them will do open houses having a host, maybe younger agents that haven't been in the business as long, and you want to give them some opportunity, do some sharing of time, but also sharing of commissions and stuff. So there's different ways of doing it. So we're just going to cover kind of an outline of the seller open house, kind of deep dive that, but then also talk about a workflow that you might deal with after the fact for both buyers and for sellers. Again, everybody is different. This is not a set in stone type of thing. So definitely think about what you guys do on your own. Some general different types of things that you need to know about. Number one, whenever you're doing an open house type of workflow, it's going to be under the property section. And we'll get into what that actually means here in a second. Whenever you start a workflow, you'll typically start it on the property itself. Therefore, we got to make sure that we set the with field as a property workflow. Make sure that that's one thing. Then it's just a matter of identifying what are some of the general tasks, the things that we want to do in order to prep and discuss. And I'm going to go into more details on each one of these. I'm not going to spend as much time on this slide. One thing that you can do, should do, want to do is, whenever you have contacts in your database, you can identify if they have attended open houses and stuff, identifying them through tags and stuff. That's important. But also, one of the things that we want to do is whenever we're creating our workflows, you may have times when you're just doing public open houses, and other times when you may be doing broker open houses, but there's similarities between the two. But there are things that you might do different for broker versus public. Be sure to use groups, and we'll talk about where and how to use that. But definitely we will make sure that these are property type workflows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to come over to Realvolve, and I have this office hours. This is just one of samples that I've kind of been playing with. This is something that whenever you set up a workflow, you're going to do certain things. Number one, just coming here, clicking on the plus and choose create a new workflow. Create a new workflow. It'll open up a brand new area here, giving this a title of some sort that makes sense to you. In this case, I just said office hours open house because we're talking about it in office hours, but you're going to have, pre-open house work, or I do have a pre-open house item there. You name it, whatever you want to do as far as what's going to happen prior to the open house. What are the things that I need to do to prep for this open house? The use with piece is property. Like I said earlier, this is going to be done from a property whenever we start this workflow. And then the rest of the items really aren't that important. However, you may want to, if you do things different for a public open house versus a broker open, we could add the group. So you might come in here and say, well, I want to have certain things for public and some things for broker. Public open, call it whatever you want. So by using groups, it would allow you to identify certain activities in your workflow to be specific to whether you're doing it for just a broker open or just a public open. Otherwise, you're just going to put it under general. So most of them are going to be probably general things. And we discussed, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago in office hours, we discussed this group section, how important it can be used in certain situations and how you might not want to use it in certain situations. But this is definitely one that could be beneficial depending on what you're doing, because a lot of the things you're doing is very common. It's just certain things you might do extra based off of whether it's broker or public. So some of the things that I have on this list are things that we've used from other workflows, and I just kind of threw them in here. Some things are things that we've learned over time. One of the things that you're going to want to do is use this as like I said before, prior to the actual open house itself. You just listed the property. You are in process of talking with the home seller and saying, okay, we're going to do this. These are the dates that are best, and you're going to identify that, but it's a matter of scheduling. So you need to discuss. So one of the activities in here is to discuss, when are we going to have this open house? Is it going to be, next Saturday, next Sunday? Is it going to be 2 Sundays from now? Whatever. Depending on all kinds of factors, obviously, whether you've got some additional work to do on the house and all the staging and all that kind of stuff that needs to be done. In this particular case, we're going to talk about just scheduling it. When are we going to schedule this? So the listing agent could be the person. They may be in a meeting with them, a phone call with the seller. It could be just an email that you send that say, hey, these are some options, or a text message. You can do a lot of different things, but ultimately what we want to do is we make sure that we fill out the open house date and time, and there's an end time as well. So if you have a 2 hour, 4 hour, whatever range, you can specify those as well. So the idea on this one activity is simply to discuss with the property owner and figure out what dates and times they would want to make sure it's in there. And maybe it's something where you've pre-designed and pre-set up some stuff. I think actually this one, actually, let me go ahead and just update that one for a second. Confirm with seller. Now this one is, actually this should be an email. I didn't put in the email on this. Confirm with seller the open house date and time. So this one, you're probably on a phone, and we probably want to come over here and just make this a call activity. This is the beauty of workflows, is you can come in here and make adjustments and stuff. This one, we want to come in and we want to say, okay, based off of filling this information out, we've made our phone call, we've completed the activity with putting in the dates and times of things. I may want to go ahead and confirm by sending an email or whatever. And the action here would be send email and having the details of that open house in that email. In this particular case, it's also, this one's assigned to the listing coordinator. If you've got a listing coordinator, they could go through and do that piece. Making sure also that you're sending the information to the seller two. One thing that to note here is whenever you're doing anything in this with field with separate party members, in this case, seller and seller two, text messages, emails, things like that do go out to each one of them individually. Where if we did this as a, actually, let me do this, kind of show you this process. What I like to do is whenever I'm creating content and whatnot, I'm going to come over here and we're going to say author new template, and we're going to say open house confirmation. In this case, it is a property. Confirmation of open house on, I'm going to put in the property street address. Okay, so just putting that in the subject line of this. So what we could do is say just confirming, just confirming, and let me make this size bigger so everybody can see. Just confirming our open house scheduled for, and then open house date and open house time. And maybe eight. Time. You can put whatever else you want in there, and then maybe it's signature. Make sure you put your signature on there. CHL, thing spell checkers there. And we're going to go ahead and click on save. So we've got this template. You put in whatever it is that you want to put in there. It's great. Then we're going to come back over here and choose, we're going to send confirmation, email. And in this one, we're going to choose send manual with preview and email and in this case, open house confirmation. So I created the template. One thing that is important whenever you're creating workflows is that you have the template available. You can't really create the template in the action, at least not at this point. Simplest thing to do is, I typically will open up a separate tab as I'm building workflows, create a tab just for the workflow side and then one for the template side. And then, sorry. And then whenever you've got those set up, you can switch between them. And unfortunately, what I just did is switched and didn't save that. Confirmation email. Manual, email, and announce confirmation. Save and update. So now what we've done is we've made the call, we've called the seller, and then that same day, once that's complete, we've sent out an email with the confirmation. No big deal. Now, the important part of this is that these two activities have the merge fields in them, just so that we know that they've been filled out. Whenever we start this workflow, the activities get created. Whenever that activity comes due, it's going to have a checklist. Those checklist items, in this case, are merge fields. Those merge fields in the checklist can be filled out. And whenever you fill them out, it fills them out inside of the property itself. So now these fields in the database have values that can be used for things. More importantly is that whenever that field gets filled in, that any activity that uses this field can get recalculated or does get recalculated. So whenever I start this workflow, I don't necessarily know when the open house is. In this case, we've got some activities that say 5 days before open house date. Well, when we start it, we don't necessarily know the open house date. We could, and if we do, go ahead and fill it out. That's great. But many times you don't know it yet because you've not gone through the process. These are kind of like reminder things. But as soon as these activities get completed, you've entered the date, the time information, then Realvolve does the magic to go through and create the date fields in each of these activities that deal with the open house date. So 5 days before the open house, we want to do certain things. And in this case, and this is where everything kind of goes different for everybody. Different people want to do their open houses different ways. In this case, we've got a checklist of things that you want to do 5 days before the open house. Make sure that the open house email distribution's done. Did I send out my emails to everybody that I need to send out? And those are the emails, and that's something we probably could create a separate activity for and just use the with field to identify who am I doing this with. And you can do it for anybody that's tagged with open house or open house notifications or whatever. Send and create the confirmation email invitations. Sometimes you want to do invitations that are just separate and do that. Sign the distribution, why would I do that? Disbursement location. I'm not sure why that one's in there. I'm going to take that one out. Wrap, and maybe for you guys that use that, maybe that's something that you know and you'd leave it in. Map out the sign disbursement. Okay. Okay. So maybe that was figuring out where you're going to put the signs in at different locations. Certainly mapping those out. Printing and mail the open house invitations to the neighbors. So if you've got a neighborhood area that you're doing, you've got neighborhood emails, making sure those get done, and determine if there's going to be a price change of any type in that. Making sure that that's all done. I'm going to go ahead and save that one. 4 days before is something where, just discuss the open house in your agent huddle. No big deal. You want to make sure that if you're doing things on a certain day, you may actually want to, instead of just say 4 days before, you may want to have it on 4 days before, or set for the one thing that you can do is come in here and say, set it for a certain Monday. So maybe you do 5 days before or whatever. So if you do something on a certain day, certain meeting days, you can do that. If you're just doing daily huddles, what am I doing on a certain day or whatever, setting that as a daily huddle is certainly another way of doing that. Emailing the lenders. So, if you're teamed up with certain lenders and seeing if they're able to attend, doing that piece. Certainly, if you've got certain lenders that you use or a lender that you use a lot, and I know there's some issues with making sure that you're not violating any rules there. Definitely set them up. You could put them in the with field, tagged with open house lenders in this case, and then sending out an email. I don't have the email set up in here, but we do the same thing that we did prior, having some kind of email says, hey, we're going to have an open house at 123 Main Street. Would you be interested in attending, and going from there. That's 4 days before. And then determining the open house host. And this is another one that, you may or may not want it, need it. If you do a lot of open houses and you can't do them all, deciding who is going to be the host is important, and making sure that's put on that listing. So we do have a party member field in the database for open house host. Identifying who that person is important, so that somebody's handling it for you. So once that is identified and put in, it will show up. If the activity itself comes due and the open house host is already identified, it's going to show it in there. If it's not, you'll be able to select who in my database can do this or should do this, and then select that host from the list. And then it'll assign that person that you selected in the checklist to the party member of that property in the people tab. So that's just a really useful option for making sure things get filled out, but also making sure that you've got somebody assigned for that open house, making sure it's getting done. Okay. Then you have the actual open house itself. In this case, open house on, and then the property street address, 123 South Main Street. Who is it assigned to? The listing agent. 0 days after the open house. Now, this is one that is important to note. One change that you're going to want to do anytime you have a specific appointment date and time for things. In this case, the open house is really an appointment. You're going to want to specify it on a certain day. In this case, the open house date, which was the same date that we identified up here as being the open house date. We had also specified the open house time in here. Well, if we filled that out, the time would also be used. So this activity as a appointment activity is titled Open House 123 South Main Street, and it's given the exact date and time of that open house. If for some reason the time changes, you change it in the database record from open house time being 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, or whatever. I wouldn't do that, but 1 o'clock, from 2 o'clock to 1 o'clock, or more in the morning, whatever. The activity that's tagged to it that has this open house time is also changed. So the activity itself is tied with the field, the date time fields in the database, so that it adjusts the appointment time itself. And this will happen for any activity that you specify a date field and the time field for, not just open houses. It's any date and time, which is another very powerful piece of the setup of any workflow, being able to customize it. And yet, if it gets changed, if during the process you determine, no, we have to do it at a different time, a closing has to be done at a different time or a different date, it will adjust. And then any activity that uses that date time as part of its calculation then gets recalculated. Hoping that all makes sense. Do have a question here. Would we have this in our pre-listing or listing workflow? I would do this as probably pre-listing. I mean, you could do it in either place. Once it's listed, you could do this. I would actually have this as, if it was me, you could do either one of those. I have it as just a separate open house, because there may be times when it's not appropriate to do the open house, and you would just run this. So you could actually have this open house workflow started whenever from an activity of your pre-listing or your listing process. So you might have an activity in either one of those workflows and say, okay, am I going to have an open house? And if I am, start the open house workflow at this particular time, once I've listed it or once I've pre-listed or whatever. That's totally up to you. Either one will work just fine. Hope that answers that question. Let's see. Okay, determine the open house. Where were we at? Email 5 days before. Determine the placement of the signs. I did that 2 days before open house. Okay, so the open house appointment. So you have the open house. Everything hopefully goes through as planned. One thing that I would also offer as an idea, and certainly not something that you have to do, obviously, but you could very easily use a Google form for registering people. A lot of agents will just have a form. Hey, fill this out. Let me know if you're interested in buying or selling your home, or what your interest is in being here today, and putting that in on just a paper form. The challenge with that is, once you go through the process of the open house, once everything is out, then you've got this paper form that you've got to go through and start entering data into Realvolve to deal with the people that have attended, which is great. But sometimes you can't read their writing. Sometimes you can't see what they wrote or whatever. And if you have a Google form, you can do a couple things. Number one, you could have an iPad right there where they can fill it out. The challenge there is that you certainly have to, keep an eye on the iPad. The other thing that you could do very easily is just set up a QR code where they can take a picture of it, open it up on their existing phone, fill out some basic information from a Google form, and that Google form then sends the information to a Google spreadsheet. By putting it in the Google spreadsheet, you could set up a Zapier connection to automatically import those names, tags, all the information that you've put into that form right into the database so that it then automatically fills in your Realvolve database. At that point, it can also start a workflow. And if they've identified, hey, I'm a potential buyer or I'm a potential seller, you can start the appropriate workflow immediately, before they're even out of the house, and let them know, hey, if you need anything, any information, blah, 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 you go through that process. That's going to be up to you as far as where you want your automation to take you and how far do you want to go. But that's a great opportunity for you to save time in your daily process. How much time does it take to go through, entering that data for any particular open house? If it's not a big deal for you and you just want to enter it manually, that's great. If you get a lot of traffic and keeping up with that traffic becomes a challenge, using a form on a regular basis like that can reduce the time and the stress of trying to figure out how to spell certain names. If they scribble, have doctor writing, how do you spell that name, and a lot of inaccuracies that happen. And by using a Google form, that definitely makes it a whole lot easier. So the activity happens. Now we go through the process of saying, okay, let's do some things after the fact. So one day after the open house, in this case, review the open house with the agents in the huddle. How did it go? Just do some follow-up. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And this is also a great opportunity to identify things that you missed. Did I not, get a new tablecloth for the desk, or whatever, and how could I have made this open house run smoother? That at that point you can come back in, identify those things, come back in, make adjustments to the workflow, so the next time that you run the workflow, it has the appropriate adjustments to help it run smoother. So the review is an important piece, just to do what I call the design, build, run, repeat process. You design your workflow, you build it, you run it, which is what we're talking about doing here, and then you repeat, where you go back to the design phase. What went right, what went wrong, and then go through whatever it is that you can do to correct that. In this case, it's just a discussion, no biggie. Then 5 days, actually, in this case, and this is like one day after the open house, I do have some, trying to figure out 5 days after, 5 days before. This is interesting. This isn't put in the right place. This may be a result of the recent update, and I need to have our team look at this. There is a couple things here that we want to do before the open house, and this is 5 days before. In this case, we have an email that goes out. So in this case, just 10 tips to prepare your open house. And I think this one, let me open this up. Yeah. Something that I was playing with, doesn't look great. I went through and just used OpenAI or ChatGPT. I said, give me the top 10 tips to prepare for your open house. And it gave me a list in HTML, and I just kind of pasted it in there. You'd want to make sure it's pretty and has all the information in there, but definitely an opportunity for those that don't want to come up with a lot of context of whatever you're talking about. You can generate through ChatGPT. But anytime that you do anything like that, definitely read through it. Make sure it's what you would want. Use some real estate common sense and make sure that it is actually appropriate, because OpenAI, ChatGPT, any of the AI programs can give false information, give bad information. So you guys are the experts. Fill in. This just gives you an opportunity to kind of give you a launching pad to be able to do the things that you want to do. Okay. See, 3 days before the open house is in this case, I'll print out the open house flyers, making sure that those are available, because you want to make sure that those activities that you do for preparing are all preparing things that you're going to take in a box or something to the open house. In this case, just saying, hey, print out 20 open house flyers, or the house flyers itself. However many you normally print out, put in there. You can adjust that. Okay, so some of these, 0 days after the completion date of the confirmed seller open house date. And so we've got some activities in this case where it will calculate the date based on this activity. So some of these activities come through and they say, well, I just want it to be so many days after I start the workflow. Great. I want this to be so many days before or after the open house date itself. In this case, we've gone through the process of saying, okay, there are certain activities, in this case, email open house scheduled to the team members. Once I've completed the activity of confirming it, because maybe I don't confirm it the day it's due. Maybe I don't confirm it the second day after it's due. I finally get hold of the seller and I get it all completed. The activity of confirm, which is this one up here, is actually completed. Maybe it was a couple days after it was actually due. What I do then is I say 0 days after the completion of that, which may be a couple days after it was due, go ahead and email the schedule to the team members. And in this case, it's using the with field. In this case is saying tagged with any of my team. So if we take a look at this, if you've got several members on your team, you can set up a tag that just says my team. And then in that case, whenever you want to send anything to your team, you can just send it to anybody that's tagged my team in this case. So this would then send out an email and go through there. And I didn't have the email actually in there, but it's the same thing. You just go through that process. And then the open house checklist, this was the same type of thing, 0 days after the confirmation. So the checklist on this one is, create the open house folder, fill out the open house info, street, print it, place it. These are all things that are just kind of in here. Other people have recommended them. I'm just using this in my trainer workflow, but you guys put in the things that count for you. I don't want to pretend that everybody needs to do it this way. You do it the way you want to do it, but just make sure that you account for the things that you do and put them in. learn from what you've done, figure out how could I have done better, and then add more things as you go along. It's as simple as that. Okay. So that is, that's kind of the entire open house workflow. That is all the prep work and the post work that it takes to do an open house. It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with following up with the buyers and the sellers that attended that open house. That's a different workflow, but it does give you all the prep work that you need to do pre and post workflow or open house activity itself. Now, one thing that we would want to do, coming back to the groups, is, is there any activity in here that's just specific to a public open versus a broker open? If there is, I don't know, for the lenders, maybe you wouldn't do that for a broker open. You wouldn't worry about that. So in that case, we would come here and just identify that as an activity that I would do for a public open. It's as simple as that. Hit open. So whenever you start this workflow and it creates the activities in the database, it will ask you, is this public? Is it broker? And depending on which options you choose, it will either include or exclude certain activities based off of what is selected in the checklist. So there's that. Going back to the idea of you're getting leads from that open house, hopefully you're getting some leads. Either they filled out that paper form or they filled out a Google form and potentially you've zapped them in. You could just manually import them using a CSV file. But you've brought that information in, and then once you've brought that information into the database through a zap, you could actually start certain workflows. And I've got some here, and these are some that our navigators have available, but very, very common types of things that you're going to do. So in this case, we've got a buyer lead that attended the open house. And if we got that lead through Zapier, it automatically imported that contact. It could automatically then start this workflow and have this already into the activities that need to be done. First thing to do, 0 days after start date. Once I've started this, schedule a call. Maybe this is 1 day after, maybe this is, maybe you don't want to call them right on the open house date. Maybe it's 1 day after, whatever, you can do that. A follow-up email, potentially. Send something to the lender. Hey, I've got somebody that, potentially needs to be pre-qualified, be pre-approved. If they did get pre-approved, weekly follow-up after that. Just different things that you could do if it's a buyer lead. And then after 3 months, if they're on this particular one basically just says, evaluate the lead and, delete the contact if I need to. I personally wouldn't delete them. I'd probably set them as a cold lead or a really not a hot lead where they're going to be moving within the next, so many months or whatever, but definitely, assign them some kind of tag. You could set them up instead of a weekly type of follow-up, maybe a bi-weekly, which is what this one does. So it kind of adjusts the workflow. After a certain point, it just comes in and starts another workflow, so you don't let that lead fall through the cracks. And that's kind of the name of the game, is don't let your leads fall through the cracks. So this would be for a buyer lead. Seller leads, a lot of similarities, but there's some additional things that you'd probably want to do. Home valuations, send out an email offering some home valuation stuff, as is sale email, which comes first. There's a lot of activities here that actually I've not spent a lot of time on this particular workflow. Like I said, this is one of the Navigator workflows. They would go through this, but basically it's just identifying what are the things, if it is a seller lead, what do I want to do? And based off of what I want to do, put it in the workflow and then do the follow-up. Pretty much that. And that's it. Any questions? I know I hit you guys with a ton of things. We could answer any questions on either the open house thing that I went through or the lead part of it as well. You can either unmute yourself or put in the chat.
Mark, this is tangentially related to making contact with leads.
Okay.
When we assign, when we create a workflow item or task, we've noticed that what happens is, and we always do the email with preview. It will show the person who is triggering the workflow or completing the task at that point.
Okay.
But the recipient is apparently seeing the person originally assigned that task, even though we've overridden it. Is that the norm? Do we have to reassign the task to have the correct sender for an email?
The sender is always going to be, and we have discussed this as being an enhancement, which I think I will probably make available very soon. Probably something we'll work towards next month. So any activity that is in here that you're going to send as an email, you really need to have the person, in this case, whoever it's assigned to is the person that's going to be sending it. What we have discussed on doing, and if you come down into the actions, say, actually, well, let me just do it this way. Send email. I won't save this one. So manual with preview, email, and perhaps confirmation. Go back to this one here. So we do have options for CC and BCC, but that's just the receiver. It's not the sender. We have discussed putting an option in here to allow you to have an alternate sender, but right now the way it's set up is it's sent by whoever it's assigned to. So if it's the listing agent, the record owner, you could certainly do that. I would whoever this activity is assigned to. So if the activity gets reassigned to a different user, it should be based off of whoever it gets assigned to. Am I missing what you're asking, or is that answer?
Sort of. I mean, we're converging. Essentially, okay. What we have a team member who they're out quite a bit right now for some personal medical issues. So another agent is going through their tasks on a particular client activity tab. Okay, this needs to be completed. This needs to be completed. And when they do the complete and say run that task, it brings up the email in preview. Their name is on the from at that point, but when it actually goes out, or what the recipient sees is the person it was originally assigned to, even though we thought it was the person who was actually showing on the preview being sent from.
Okay. whenever you're doing that, are they logged in as that person? I don't see how that name would be listed there. That's the thing.
Well, they're
that's
logged in
confusing.
as themselves. So,
Okay.
you've got team member A and team member B. Team member A is out right now. Team member B is covering for them. They triggered the task that was supposed to be run, and their team member B's name in the preview is showing as the sender, but the recipient is seeing team member A.
And that's the part that's throwing me. That doesn't coincide with what I know should be happening.
Well, through us too.
I'll take a look at that after this and see if I can duplicate that process and figure out. Technically, what I would do is if team member B is covering for team member A, I would come in and say log in as team member A, look at if they've got the ability to do that. I mean, and then at that point, you're logged in as if you're that team member A, and then you're able to send and do the things that you need to do. That way you're looking at their calendar, you're actually mimicking them, and then be able to send it out. And I don't really have any activities here that would do that in this case. What I would probably do, let me, if you would give me your email and I'll follow up with this. Just put it in the chat.
I'll put it in chat.
There you go. It's a great question. Based off of how you've described it, I'm not seeing how that's possible, but if it's happening to you, it could be a bug that I need to make sure we deal with. So I'll definitely work on that. Let me put this over here. That's a to-do. Okay. Greg, thank you for that. I'll follow up and figure out what's going on there. Any other questions? No, I hit you with a lot. One things that
Hey, Mark.
If there's not any, wanted to, yes.
Quick question. How do you retrieve archived files? Files that have been deleted after the time period that there's, what is the retention on files? 4 years?
We don't have a retention period. They should be, if you've saved them into the files area, and if you've deleted them, or if, say for instance, we've got a file, like here's one that was 2018. It's an older one. If it is if it's in here, then it should be available. If you delete the actual activity, then it will go into under the settings under trash. And there's a documents area. There's also an attachments area. I don't have any in there, but you should be able to see them in one of those. Documents basically are the ones that that are stored in your documents area or in a contact. Attachments are very similar, but they are dealing with email type of attachments. So if it's been emailed to you and in there. Now, if you do have Google Sync turned on and you've deleted a file, it could remove it from there as well, I guess.
Okay, I will follow. I sent a ticket to support asking that question, but I will double check our settings and the Google Sync because there was a few files that I was looking for in a property that weren't there, and I didn't know how they disappeared. So Realvolve doesn't have anything set up as far as deleting files. They stay there. is my understanding.
They stay there. I mean, until you either delete the property, the contact, or the transaction that houses that, then it gets deleted. But we don't have a time limit. The only thing that we have as far as limits on there is size wise. If you are storing multiple millions of megs of data, there is a limit depending on the account size you have. You may have a limit. We do have ways of bypassing those limits, or increasing them, I should say. But there are no archiving type limits. It's just, if you do delete it, it should go into that trash area.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Okay. Did want to talk very quickly about, and we don't have a lot of time here. We did do some major updates last week. We did have some challenges, and we're actually still working through a few of them. Apologies. But what we've done is, the way Realvolve was originally designed and developed, we had some engineers offshore that created some of the pieces. And we had done an update several months ago that really caused some havoc on the calendar piece. It took a lot of re-engineering, a lot of changes kind of in the background, a lot of time, a lot of resources to get it to kind of still use what you had, but store it in a new way. And we've gone through that process. There were some conversion processes that didn't go exactly as planned, but we were making our ways through those. If many of you won't have any problems at all. If you do have a problem, let us know. There's some processes that we can do separate on your account to make sure it realigns those activities. There are some that may be a day off, where it was scheduled for a Tuesday and it's showing up on a Monday. Technically, it is a time zone differentiation, and it's off by an hour on a non-timed activity. May make no sense to you at all, but it's putting it on the day before than it should. And we've gone through and adjusted a massive majority of them, but there are so many activities, we're still running through those. We can bump you bump you up higher in the list if you know that you're one that's having that. Not everybody's having the issue, and it kind of depends on several different factors. How long you've been in Realvolve. Some of the older activities are really what's causing it, because of the way the old engineers had previously created it. Just being upfront with you guys on that. If you do have problems, let me know. We'll get you squared away. Other than that, that's all I've got today. I hope the workflow editing was useful for you guys. There's so much you can do with workflows. It's extremely powerful capability of Realvolve, and want to make sure that you guys know the resource that you've got. So have a great rest of your week. If there's anything I can do for you, certainly let me know. Bye, everyone.